Hello and welcome to the SME Focus show powered by MTDCNC. I'm Mark Weymouth from the Sensor Specialist Plus Automation. I hope to highlight aspects of interest to UK manufacturing and in particular SMEs. My guest today is James Leng, MD Pre-Met, a precision engineering metal press work stampings and assembly contract manufacturer. Hopefully James won't mind me saying that he isn't your typical manufacturing company MD. Well, that's how he described himself to me anyway. So more on that later. Pre-Met is a company based in Redditch in the West Midlands. They've been there for over 50 years. They hold 91,000, 14,001, 16949 certifications. And in a look back to episode 232, they have a high-speed brooder presses as well as automated weld lines and assembly facilities. Hi, James. Welcome to SME Focus.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much for having me. Very much looking forward to today.
Thank you for coming on, and I think I've got a sneaky feeling we'll be talking about some of your new news, so a very topical episode as well, so thanks for coming on and sharing that. Going back a little bit there in history, I guess, for question one, can I ask you to kick off by somehow managing to summarise the first 25 years of your career journey from a degree in building surveying to co-founding Value Step in 2018 and the work you've done on project delivery and business transformations?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. As you mentioned in the kind intro, I'm not really the typical manufacturing MD. I hail from a construction and contracting background, and I kicked off my career having left school with a regional building contractor in the Midlands, and spent a few years there in their procurement and purchasing team. And I then moved into the public sector. I went to work for Coventry City Council, ironically, in their building control department. And as I moved between public and private and then back to private sector, I undertook daytime college courses, which are kind of a thing of the past, I guess. But I did a building studies ONC, HNC as it was called then, and then went on to do Day Release University and got my honours degree in building surveying from what is now termed De Montfort University, but it was at the time I went Leicester Polytechnic. And I then got really interested in and hooked by a new thing called PFI and PPP in construction, which was private finance initiative and private public partnerships, and I joined a team at Tarmac called their Special Projects and Private Finance Unit, and I got to do at 25 some huge projects, so hospitals, schools, prisons, accommodation centres for MOD, and I guess the pinnacle was GCHQ, which is the government's spy headquarters, listening station down in Cheltenham. And I was the commercial manager at 25 on the project, right from the pre-qualification stage right through to when it financially closed and construction started, which was a real exciting highlight for me.
Was that on the donut or the bagel or whatever?
Donut, yeah. Which, interesting fact, you can put St Paul's Cathedral in the middle of it, just to give you an idea of the scale. Wow. Fits perfectly in the polo hole or the hole of the donut. I then was asked to recover a project that was going badly wrong, a construction project down in Bedford, and that was the kind of introduction to recovery, so business recovery or project recovery and turnaround. And I spent a year sorting out a government project, building project there, and then went on to do the claims aspects of the dispute resolution work afterwards, and spent another year doing that for the contractor with the supply chain below and the government above. And I decided at that point that it would have all been better had the contractor and the government been a little bit more intelligent in the way in which they'd procured it, and a bit more honest with each other in setting out the expectations and promises. And I then set my first company up called Augmentis, and we did public procurement, worked on big projects. So I did a big project with the Department of Health. I did a project for what was then Building Schools for the Future. And we also, as a company, very small startup consulting group, we helped pull together the Olympic delivery partner for the London Olympic Village. So the CH2M Hill American, Langer and O'Rourke, the builder, and then the project manager, program manager, Mace, we actually helped to pull that together. And we then worked underneath them as a team, helping with some of the packages of work on the site down there. And we then exited. I exited with my business partner. We sold to an American firm. And strangely, I then went into an aftermarket motor provider, so a performance car business, which my brother-in-law at the time was trying to manage. Fledgling, again, a small business, 15 or so employees. And I spent 6 years effectively trying to reorganize it, restructure it, refinance it. And in the end, after 10 years, so I didn't expect to be there quite so long, I exited in 2020. The company was recognized as a market leader with OEM relationships, 400 or so dealers globally, providing both software and hardware and integrated solutions. And I guess that was the touch to manufacturing, where some of the hardware that I was working on, I needed to go and talk to supply chain members, the likes of Alcon and Bilstein and those sorts of big organizations, global supply chain members. And I got a taste for manufacturing and saw it at the customer end as opposed to the being in the manufacturing end. I then leapt into Value Step, creating that with the business partner, Robert Osborne, who had actually created Augmentis with 20 years prior to that. We decided that it was a real opportunity to look at small to medium-sized enterprises to help give them some support, some knowledge, some wisdom, some of the grey hair, a little bit of the scars of the things that we'd seen that had gone well and badly. So having spanned public and private sector, large national contractors and organisations, and also being right at the hub of it with small to medium-sized enterprises, I felt that I'd got a real breadth of experience, and I wanted to really bring that to the fore and help those small enterprises that they're either growing and weren't quite sure how they would make the next step, or they were struggling and they needed to make some changes in order to ensure their survival. And that's the kind of journey that I went on. And I guess the link is we were asked then by the owner of Premet back in 2019 to come and have a look at his business. He had a series of concurrent issues occurring. So Premet, as you said, stretches right back to the 1970s and has been very successful, based in the Midlands, based in Redditch, 100 employees at the time, doing really well. It had itself just made an acquisition in the middle of 2019, but then its managing director had a long-term absence from work. Its FD had just retired. Its management team was struggling to pull the business together, and they had a problem with the planning, I think, and execution, with all the best intentions of where they'd got to with the acquisition that they'd just made. And all those things combined had just tipped it into this is all too difficult and complex for the existing team that was left there to sort. So we were asked to come in and do a review. We put together a nice review for the owner and identified a series of priorities. And in January 2020, he hired us. So I became the MD of Premet.
Okay. So does Value Step normally operate as a fractional management, or is it more a consultancy service? How would Value Step traditionally work before then it became sort of a do what you propose rather than just make proposals?
Yeah, we've done both, to be honest, Mark. We do offer fractional leadership. So across a chairman or a chief exec or managing director, finance, we have a HR associate that we work very closely with, PR, comms, so the whole range of the what I suppose is trendily called these days the C-suite activity. We also have a capital investment consideration, so we look at taking equity stakes or making investments in companies that we support. So we'll do a review, see whether it's an appropriate opportunity that we can actually add value. The one thing I would say is if we can't make a difference, and in some instances, although you can provide a set of solutions or proposals, sometimes it's just not what the founder, owner, or the shareholding group would like to implement. And we're very careful and conscious to make sure that we're there to add value and not just as a traditional, I'd say traditional consulting situation where you milk the client. We're not at all into that. We come and go. Now, the idea around Premet was to be gone in 9 months, but the transformation that we undertook and the restructuring took a little bit longer because of COVID. That struck us in the March just after we'd started, which for Premet was a blessing because we were able to pause manufacturing, do the restructuring behind the scenes during that period where COVID was really at its height. And then we used the furlough scheme from the government and then gradually brought manufacturing team members back into the building, and we gradually then ramped up production in a much more orderly fashion than we'd gone into COVID. So for our business, for Premet, it was a fantastic one-off, unprecedented crisis, which for us really worked quite well. I know for many it wouldn't. That certainly wouldn't be the case that you get reflected back. But from that point, we grew, we picked up more orders. We obviously, from a balance sheet perspective, were able to really strengthen the company, and we then took to the consideration of where next, what should we do next, and for us from
Can I interrupt you, James, before we do the what next and the sort of the exciting topical news? Can I ask you maybe to explain a little bit more about Premet for viewers that don't know what the business does? So can you run us through what markets you serve, obviously what differentiates it from other subcontract metal engineering businesses, and then I guess that leads to where do you see Premet developing, and also the excitement of what you have done and the transitions you've taken and the purchases recently. So tell us about Premet, if you would, please.
Absolutely. So Redditch based, it has been in Redditch since the 1970s. It's a small to medium sized enterprise. So at the moment we're looking at a turnover of around 6 million, 60 odd employees. We are you use the term maybe metal basher. I'd use the term precision metal component producer. We do pressings, stampings, we do wire forming and springs, and we also do welded and just general assembly of components. And we really operate across a broad spectrum of market segments. So we're looking at aerospace and defense. We're looking at what we now call mobility, which traditionally you would hail as automotive. But with the introduction of EV, electric vehicles, and the gradual move away from the internal combustion engine, which we term ICE. We look at mobility as a broader sector. Electronics, so we produce a lot of components for the manufacturers that are working in data centers, for example, or are working in areas where there's far more electronic activation and components in day-to-day household items. So there's a huge electronics area there. We look at construction, which we call environmental and standards. So we produce a lot of components that would go into suspended ceilings, partitions, be used by electricians and plumbers and things like that as part of the construction process. We've got some activity in audiovisual, although that's kind of an area where our Mosses and Mitchell brand has started to decline, I guess, in the digital age, because it's an analog system. So we produce analog AV equipment for the industry. There is a real sense, I suppose, like vinyl records, you've gone from one to another, but everyone has then leapt back to vinyl, because you would argue that the quality of the sound is so good. And again, analog, for those that are in the know and in the profession, they feel that it's the best quality that they can possibly get. So we do audiovisual. And more recently, we are now extending into transportation. So we are producing some components for the rail industry, which is quite interesting and exciting. So that's a little bit about us. We have hand presses, which would be for the small, low volume and intricate work. And they're literally fly presses that are operated by people by hand, right up to, as you mentioned, some medium and high speed brooder presses. We've got a whole range of other hydraulic presses, ranging from 20 ton right up to 160, which is our largest press at the moment. And a whole range of manufacturer presses as well. We've got Ching Fong, we've got Yangli, we've got Worcester presses, we've got all sorts of different presses across the factory floor. We have 50,000 square feet and of manufacture space, and I'd say probably 75, 80 presses, just to give you some idea. Also have robot welding, and manual welding, and some wire form and spring making machines as well. We have our own in-house tool shop, which for a business of our size is thriving quite well. We predominantly does our own maintenance and new tooling work, but it's really nice to have a tool shop with a really strong team and some good equipment in there. So we're well supported in a tooling sense.
Okay. I mean, there's a preview of an upcoming episode. We will be talking about the tool making apprenticeship and the work that's going into trying to develop that. So keep an eye on a few episodes ahead. So I think
absolutely.
In-factory tool shops are an incredible resource if you can afford to have them, and then reap the benefits of having them. And hopefully the apprenticeship route is a great scheme to help support people do that. I'm mindful that some viewers have the misfortune of not being in the West Midlands and probably think of Redditch as just being a bit of a new town, sort of on the edge of Birmingham. But I thought it's worth mentioning that Redditch has got an amazing history of spring production. Are you able to say a little bit about that? You probably know more than I do. So tell us a tiny little bit about Redditch, if you would, please, and springs.
Redditch is like Northampton is to the Formula One industry, and kind of Birmingham has its jewellery quarter. Redditch is a historical epicentre of spring manufacture and metal stampings and pressings, and it hails back probably a century of various, running from things like predominantly making cufflinks and high quality pen nibs and those sorts of pressings, right through now to we have aerospace manufacturers that are doing state-of-the-art production, obviously automotive, the construction industry, electronics industry. They've really, it's an industry where if you threw a radius around Premet's factory, there would be 50, maybe 60 peer manufacturers, similar scale, some smaller, some larger, within that radius. It's a real centre of historic manufacturing excellence.
I think it's fascinating that if I was to pick a product, I would say the majority of people would look at a spring, even a high precision spring in a sophisticated piece of engineering, and just assume that it's made in China. So I think it was worth taking a little diversion to mention that, Redditch really is the beating heart of spring production.
Yeah. And the spring, very often you wouldn't really realise many components that are then assembled have a spring aspect to them. We make for one of the OEM vehicle manufacturers, we make a pedal box that has the accelerator, clutch and brake side of things, and we also produce the spring that helps return it back to its position. So we produce a nice composite assembly situation there, which is then goes off and has the rubber put onto the pedal and the various different components then added for a finished product.
Okay, so I guess now is a perfect time to ask you about quality springs and pressings, or QSP. So tell us your news.
We for 18 months, so part of the journey of taking Premet from kind of struggling to quite strong and with solid foundations, we were asked by the owner to look at acquisitions. So the reason I know there's 50 or so similar manufacturers in a 5 or 10 mile radius is because we've done a lot of analysis of our competition and the peer companies around us that might be ideal targets, as it were, to acquire. And we spent a lot of time reviewing what they do, who they are, what they make, what sectors they serve, what customer groups they've got. And we narrowed a search down, and ironically, Quality Springs is a mile away from us. Now, before and we've actually worked together in the past, just separately doing mini projects together, which is quite interesting in itself. And we approached the owner back in the autumn last year. We talked to them about the potential of an acquisition, and we went through a process then of exchanging information, talking about the real detail around that would enable us to do such a transaction. And then at the end of January, we finalised terms and effectively completed the deal. So Quality Springs is a small manufacturer doing about 1.8 million of turnover, 15 employees. Again, looking at automotive, construction, transportation markets, and a similar style to us. They did more springs than we did, and more wire form work, but they also do some really nice pressing work. So the opportunity to bring them on board and consolidate the activity under one roof just was really exciting. They also have robot welding, which we didn't, so there was a real opportunity to broaden the depth of service that we were providing. And from their perspective, they outsourced their tool room work because they're too small to have their own in-house tool support. That was causing them delays and obviously costing them the cost of getting that service. So there were real synergies and opportunities to combine the workforce, secure a bigger concentration of activity, and broaden our opportunity to service more customers. So it was a no-brainer.
Excellent. Well, I'm sort of renowned for trying to share good news, and as you said there, and I'll sort of stress again, spectacular news that you kept the employees because of that fortunate situation of being so close. So you're able to truly absorb the companies rather than just buying a trademark. So that's always worth celebrating.
And literally, Mark, we're in the middle of transferring the team this week and next week. Machines have been going over for the last few weeks. The team are going to be on site and start their integration and induction and the work at our Studley Road site from next week. So it's live action, as it were.
Brilliant. Okay, a bit of a change of tack, having sort of read back the company and what we talked about with the company. I noticed that you mentioned JOSCA, and earlier this week I was in a networking call where the practicalities of obtaining the defence industry or approval for JOSCA was sort of discussed. So can I ask you a little bit about your thoughts as you've recently obtained it, and perhaps your insight to other SMEs considering the practicalities of getting JOSCA certification, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a defence, security and aerospace procurement portal, really, and we're finding a lot more of our customer groups and a lot more opportunities to provide responses to inquiries are coming through the online portal purchasing approach. And although we're on several other portals for several other sectors, we've looked at defence and aerospace as a growing market. I mean, let's be honest, the things that are going on in the world at the moment with the conflicts, governments all over Europe are piling the funding into new defence work, whether that be vehicles or whether that be munitions and the like, or other technologies that require intricate pieces of pressings. So our logic was, if we can be accredited, we're already accredited in a quality sense, if we can be accredited as a preferred registered supplier on an industry leading or the industry leading platform for procurement purchasing opportunities, then that would be a good thing from our business development and future sales point. So we looked into what did it need, how would we go about it, and really what information have we got that would provide the review by JOSCA and Helios to actually support our application. So we're looking at things like quality assurance, you're looking at turnover and financial strength, you're looking at experience in the sector, references, you're looking at insurance cover, you're looking at the quality assurance coverage as well. And we felt that we ticked most of the boxes, and we put a little team on to working through each of the questions, which worked very well. So it was a little focus group. It included the quality guy, it included our dispatch products manager, it also included our finance director, and they ground through the questions literally one by one, uploaded the evidence behind the scenes, the certifications and the accounts and things like that, which all businesses, they may be disparate and spread around, but you've got them, and if you then pull them together, you'll be able to upload them. And the process was actually relatively straightforward. It took a few weeks to get all those documents in place in a format that they accepted, and then they took a couple of weeks to review us and accredit us, which is for us is a relatively, I think, short period of time, and we're very excited by the opportunity to then now start responding to inquiries that suit our there's a big funnel, and obviously there's huge amounts of procurement that go through it, but we've tailored the categories to what we produce. So the inquiries are very specific. So it doesn't take a lot of time for us to review whether it's something that we can do and we feel we'll be competitive with. And we're hoping that that will bring a lot more new work together. We've also, in parallel to that, we've just been told that we've been approved for the MOD's main defence procurement site as well. But that's a little bit of news behind the scenes, as it were. We're not ready to fully announce that, but I'm happy to share it because we're quite excited about the fact that we've done that too.
Okay, excellent. So I guess continuing the theme a little bit, or tenuously anyway, from aerospace and defence, which are global industries, if I can lead on to a couple of more sort of general questions. So if I can kick off with one and maybe ask your opinion on the current and I guess the ongoing global uncertainties and the conflicts and the tariffs we've got. What are your thoughts on what really is happening in the world and how it affects you as an SME manufacturer, and how you're coping, how you see things going forward?
Wow, that's a big one, Mark.
Sorry.
The world is in a very unsettled place. Huge conflicts, devastating conflict obviously going on in Ukraine. There's the desperate situation that's in Gaza. They're the two main ones, but there's also so many other areas in the world that have conflicts raging at the moment that perhaps are a couple of pages or a couple of news stories behind those, nonetheless as devastating and shocking. But the whole global market, I think, has struggled to react and respond cohesively to the results of those conflicts. And then you layer on October, the change of government prior in the UK particularly, and its October budget and the changes in the October budget for SMEs, being told they've got, and in the manufacturing industry, where we rely frankly on a load of dedicated resources that are operators that are, at minimum wage pay rates. Let's be honest. All of a sudden, you have the NI change, the threshold change to NI. You then have minimum wage increases way above inflation, and your cost base has shifted dramatically. And you've got effectively 6 months to try and figure out how you're going to respond to that between the October announcement and the April implementation. And at the same time, the US has gone through its own election of a president, and Donald Trump's in for the second term. And, America's an interesting place in my view, in that, 50 years ago, it was the pinnacle of manufacture. It was the heart and probably the engine of the global economy. But look at China, and you look at the scale of Chinese industry and the modernization of it. They've step changed and leapt 2 or 3 generations beyond what the US and European industries and economies can do, because we've got an existing aging infrastructure both in the US and the UK in terms of manufacturing, and I'll talk about automotive players. Henry Ford 100 and so many years ago was the first guy to automate production, and obviously investment has taken place, and the British car industry has risen and collapsed down to, I think, 1% of global numbers now. Europe's in a similar position now to where Britain was 35 years ago. So, you've got world leading Volkswagen Audi brand, and you've got the Italian brands and French and the like, but actually they're under some significant pressure. And if you think that Tesla took the march in the EV market, absolutely the pioneer and the biggest first to market, they're now looking quite old school compared to some of the things that are being produced by the Chinese. both in technological terms, you know, BYD and XPeng, they're pretty impressive motors from a consumer perspective. And they're producing them at such a scale without the burden of European and US employment laws. The European ones being worse than America, so it puts Europe and the UK really on the back foot. And they're producing them at a scale. They've got better technology, which I would argue they've probably replicated and improved. So they've really been able to get there very quickly. Compared to the century it took us all to get where we are, China in EV terms has done it in 10 years.
Yeah.
And the speed of that is accelerating by the day. If you look at the BYD factory in China, it's a city. You think about it in the terms of Bourneville chocolate factory, and it makes Bourneville look like a Lego village, if I can be kind of crude. And BYD's factory in China has been replicated in Brazil and Mexico, and there's one coming into India, and there's going to be another one in Europe. These things are huge. They're cities with schools and all of the infrastructure around, supermarkets, schools, cinemas, all sorts of things, all on site. Their workers are there, they do it, they produce it, and they're already producing 35-40% of the world's EV car market. So, there's a lot going on in the world, and I think uncertainties are causing our customers. So we have global customers across the supply chains of all those industries that I've mentioned. And what I've seen is my order book go from a 3-year kind of firm outlook right back to probably 3 months firm, 6 months indicative. And that's really tough. We used to be able to look at an investment decision over a couple of years. Now I'm needing to almost guess it over a few months. Do you do it? Don't you do it? And Donald Trump, bless him, some people hate him, some people love him. I'm kind of on the fence. I think America needs to change because it cannot carry on consuming as much and expecting to be wealthy without changing its baseline. Tariffs do not work. Absolutely do not work, in my opinion. And putting them on and turning them off like a light switch is causing America to go, well, we haven't got a clue what's going on, let alone Europe. 25%, then it was nothing, then it's 10, then it's 25, now it's 50 threatened again. Like every single customer we've got and our supply chain below us, we're all guessing, finger in the air time. Is he going to get onto his true social media and post something that's going to shift global markets overnight while I'm sleeping? I don't know. And that's a real tough one.
The big fear is the only market that's got the stability and therefore can invest in automation and manufacturing improvement is China. Trump is now making the rest of the world even less likely to invest.
Absolutely. And they just don't. Their domestic market is 1 billion people. So the majority of what they produce is domestic consumption. What goes on outside China is dramatically important to China, clearly, because they are one of the bigger exporters in the world. But actually, just domestic consumption there is bigger than Europe and America combined. So that's the scale of what you're dealing with. I've seen pictures of mountains, huge mountain ranges with solar panels on. Like if we have a field with solar panels in, people are putting their arms up with horror going, oh, that's terrible. They've got mountains of them. They build a gas power station a week, they build an airport a month. The scale and momentum of activity in China and therefore manufacturing in China is scary. It's impressive on one scale, and for an SME in Redditch with 60 employees, it's terrifying.
Yeah. So if we contrast the Chinese fondness for strategies, and particularly if you think of the the 5-year plan declaring their commitment to EV cars and then try and bring that home. It sounds almost like a joke for a Saturday morning that the show will go out, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The UK industrial strategy, we've been crying out for one for a very long time. Hopefully it's getting close. What are your thoughts on the UK industrial strategy paper, the topics that should be in it, and particularly your thoughts regarding SMEs and the industrial strategy?
I was asked this a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it's an interesting one, Mark. It's needed without question. It includes the West Midlands, so that's a tick. It includes advanced engineering and manufacturing. Now I'm on the fence as to whether it says SME. It doesn't. It doesn't mention the word SME anywhere. I see it
3 times in the draft document.
I just see it being a route to continue to support the likes of Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems, maybe Jaguar Land Rover, those that were all mentioned by Keir Starmer when the tariff really kicked off. He turned up in Jaguar Land Rover's factory day one. Day two, he was in Rolls-Royce's facility in Derby. I haven't seen him visit a single SME manufacturer anywhere. So I think it's a good thing, as in global strategy, thinking about the future, thinking about 10, 20, 30 years time. I just don't think it will filter down to the likes of a Premet or other UK manufacturers, because although we're the engine of GDP across the country and employ much more, many more people than the top 10, we're just not big enough news, and I think we're too fragmented in that sense. And the government can only do so many visits a week for press, and they choose the big ones, and they choose the ones that make the headlines, the ones that are making the jet engines for the next generation fighter, or the nuclear power stations that are about to be announced, or the ones that are exporting the 100,000 cars to the US that are affected by the direct tariffs. I'm a bit, my jury's out. I don't think personally the industrial strategy will help the likes of manufacturers akin to Premet, which is, I think is sad, but I think that's a reality.
Okay. Traditional last question for the show, so trying to move to something slightly more positive to wrap up. Can I ask you what you've got planned or what you hope to achieve in the next 12 months? And that can be a personal answer or a business answer or both.
Well, I don't ever want to land on a negative, Mark. So we're not standing still. We're not going down in flames. We're not going to wait. We're going to find our next acquisition targets. We're going to find our next customer groups. We're going to continue to broaden the services, continue to invest in the people that we have, the great people that we have, continue to develop our quality, zero defect quality performance, and make sure we maintain that. And we're going to carry on. We're going to carry on fighting. I think that's the difference. I think if you stand still, you'll fail, and you will decline. You will go out of business eventually. The one thing I'm sure of is status quo isn't an option anymore. I think the days of just hoping it's going to get better are gone, and I think you have to be proactive and put your best foot forward. And from a personal point of view, I am going to go out sea rowing, which is something that I've just picked up as a hobby over the last few months, having moved to Ireland a couple of years ago, and I get the opportunity to go out in a boat and row backwards and forwards up the coastline, which is great news.
And is this just you in a boat, or you in I can't think what the correct word is for the boats that are sort of modelled on the old lifeboats?
Yeah, a little skiff, four oar with a cox shouting at us. Okay. Well, not actually, gently encouraging us rather than shouting at us. But yeah, it's an interesting. It's nice to be back to nature, and you get glorious views. You can see the Wicklow Mountains one way, and on a good day you can't quite see Wales and Snowdon, but you could pretend you can.
I have to admit, I'm sat in Cornwall at the minute, so I'm looking out at the sea. So yeah, nature kind of makes everything else seem quite insignificant, doesn't it? Okay. Can I ask how people find out more about Pre-Met, and also maybe how they follow you or they contact you?
Well, for my sins, I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a public profile on LinkedIn, so do touch base, offer comment, and get in touch with me via LinkedIn. Love to hear you. We've got a website at ValueStep, which is www.valuestep.co.uk, so you can come and see a little bit about how we help SMEs and what we're up to in that sense. Pre-Met, we've taken the domain of metal stampings and pressings.co.uk, but if you search pre-met, you'll find us again on our website, and we're trying to keep it up to date and trying to make sure that it's as deep and meaningful and informative as we possibly can. So there you go, Mark. 3 different ways. Brilliant.
Well, thanks, James, for being a guest this week. Do you have any final words or sign off for our viewers? Probably most people are watching this at the weekend.
Well, enjoy your weekend. I hope it's going to be sunny. We've had some odd weather where it's been raining, but very hot when the sun does come out. So enjoy it. And the world's bright. There's so many good things going on in the world. We often get drawn into looking at the news. Stay away from the news. That's what I'd say. Give yourself a break from the news and think of spending time with family, friends, and loved ones.
Sounds like a damn good sign off. So I'm going to wrap up with the usual boring words, but if you'd like to get in touch with the show with a comment, a suggestion, or more importantly, if you'd like to appear in a future episode, please email us at inquiries@mtdcnc.com or contact myself, Stuart Whitehead, or Joe Reynolds. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. From me, Mark Weymouth, Plus Automation, the Sensor Specialist. Cheers. Have fun.